Hey, bro, what you doing?
Yo, the book finally came in, bro.
For real? It just came in? Hey, you know we got an interview right now.
Yeah, Wingless Comics.
Yeah, Brian Lambert of Wingless Comics, man. He gonna talk about his Kickstarter and all the books he got. And he talking about some DC and Marvel versus Shonen Jump type stuff too, man. So we need to go ahead and do this interview.
Yeah, man, but you know I gotta handle this. Man. I gotta get my books.
Yeah, I know you need to get this shit, man.
I'm supposed to wait on my books, and I gotta do it, man.
Really?
These books.
Hey,
these books. These books right here are more important, man.
I got to interview, by myself, like always.
Yeah, bro.
But
go
yeah,
ahead,
I
do you,
man. Put a good word in for you.
Go ahead, bro.
You actually doing some work this time.
What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the hood. Welcome back to Chill on the Green Box with Specks, Thompson, and The View. And once again, my co-host can't be here. But hey, he said he's working on his book this time. He actually doing some work, so be on the lookout for that. But hey, we got another great creator, somebody that I've been in touch with since I started. We believe we started around the same time, which is pretty dope. But he done jumped miles ahead of me. But Brian Lambert, man.
How's it going, man? Thank you, man. Sorry, man. I was looking forward to meeting The View, man, and him chatting it up. But that's how things go, right?
Yeah, man. But crazy part, he'll appear at cons and stuff like that, but he won't appear on a show that all he do is sit down and talk. It was crazy.
Right. He's too Hollywood these days. But yeah, man, it's been actually cool, and we did kind of start around almost the same time. But I've been fortunate, man. I got a really great team behind me, beside me, and all of that. So it's been a good experience to be able to do what we do.
Yeah, we're gonna dive deeper in that. But tell the people who you are and what you do, people who don't know you.
So I'm Brian Lambert, CEO, founder of Wingless Comics, also the writer and creator of our flagship title, Justice, and the writer and creator of our first crossover, Nightfall. That was in conjunction with Concept Moon Studios and Constant Hustle Comics. So I've been in the writing game for quite a few years, self-published a title called Ascension, the Crucian Saga Book 1, that is part of a 12-book series, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth in terms of self-publishing, and I moved over into creating comics and comic content in the indie space with Wingless Comics and ostensibly Wingless Entertainment, my companies. We are in our 4th issue now. We fully funded last night. So Justice is actually currently on Kickstarter right now for Justice issue 4, and we actually fully funded the campaign last night. So we're on to stretch goals, additional funding, and all of those things that we need in order to keep the series going and to keep the printing and the process going.
Cool. And you the first guest I get to use this for. Let's see how it go.
Okay.
For funding,
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate it, man. It's actually really, really dope. I wasn't expecting it last night. We're only 3 days into the campaign, so we've been doing really, really great for these 3 days. Obviously, we've been going really, really strong, which is always what we want. But we always want to continue to keep funding and keep sharing the project, keep talking about it, because we want to continue funding so we can do more interesting projects like our crossovers, like new books, like getting stickers out there and bookmarks, and all these little things that kind of make everything we do more fun and more interesting.
Cool. That's real dope, man. So the point of the show, is for people to find out who you are and get a chance to meet you versus, most shows, that I witnessed that a creator go on there for an hour or two, just talk about their Kickstarter, and people never find out a reason why to support the creator. They're like, okay, I heard about this book for 2 hours, but why should I care? So my show is to help creators, find fans, of them versus, whatever they're talking about on their book, and nobody cares after book 1 or 2 or whatever. I want people to follow you in your journey, to support you the whole way through. So I created this show, which is based off something that I find out most creators I interviewed didn't experience, but as a child, I think it's a subtle thing that we chill on the green box, that electrical box in front of the neighborhood. Did you partake in that?
So, man, I had one of those moms that was, I don't want to say overprotective, but very protective. So I couldn't be on the green box because we had him, but she was always real concerned about like radiation and blah 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 blah, right? And yeah, right. So we actually had where I grew up. Our green box was our building had like a pretty nice sized stoop. So the green box is on the side, and we had the stoop. So we actually chilled more on the stoop because we knew we weren't gonna get in trouble there. You know what I mean? We knew all of us could come together there, as opposed to half of us could be there, one place, and half of us could be 10 feet away. So, but that's where all the that's where all the all of us were gonna be rappers or singers or dancers or something. You know what I mean? Like that's the old school thing that I don't think kids get anymore. Really, it's just not the same. But we were able to get out there. We were bagging on each other. Again, somebody's gonna be beatboxing and trying to make a beat with a pencil and a coin. And everybody thought they were the best MC. You know what I mean? Like all the things that kind of influenced, I guess, where the culture is now in general, man. So I love that old school kind of 3 months of summer type feeling. You know what I mean? Where we were just out and we were able to like exist.
Yep. So you already got the rundown. So like, my first segment is called breaking it down. So when you was on that stoop, your friends, y'all break stuff down, concepts, and there's other things. So in this first segment, I got a series of icebreaker questions that I'm trying to break your brain down so people get a head start understanding, who you are. Mm-hmm. So you ready for that?
Yeah, man. Rapid fire. Let's go.
All right. First question. What's your favorite superhero?
Oof. Okay, so favorite superhero is difficult, right? Because it depends on how you define superhero. I've always been
like
huge.
You got the Dow H for hero thing, man. You got press that one button.
Right.
Who you gonna?
Honestly, man, I'm a Batman guy, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. But again, if we want to be technical and nerdy, he don't have superpowers, so is he a superhero? But I've always been a Batman guy. I just find it really interesting. I like some of the older versions of Batman where it was like the world's greatest detective. Like it would be some little small thing or some little panel that you would see in the very beginning of the comic, and he'd be able to solve this great mystery at the end because he had seen this little thing at the beginning. Like I like that style, that Sherlock Holmes kind of style of Batman, where he's also like a master fighter, where he's basically like the number 2 best at everything, right? Like second most money, second best fighter, second, you know what I mean? So he's he creates this kind of character that I liked, and I always I think that, I mean, when you're talking about originally, like him stemming out of tragedy just kind of really spoke to me, and my personal, life experience of like becoming this person that wanted to protect everybody and that wanted to make sure everybody was okay because they endured something that was traumatic for them, and they wanted to do whatever it took to stop it from happening to somebody else. So I always really gravitated to that version of Batman.
Cool. That's dope. That's dope. What you saying though, what you define as superhero, just you talking, just me thinking. I think a superhero would be somebody who does something on a greater level, because as a child or somebody in school, you'd be like, who's your heroes? Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, LeBron James for some people. They just consider heroes because they just, I guess, somebody to look up to and they just do things in the community. Versus, I guess, superhero who do things like on a bigger scale, because
I think some of the larger than life aspects of cartoons, comics, movies, like all these things are what create superheroes. Obviously, like a kid could literally be the next LeBron James, right? That's not to down his legacy or anything. But someone can be the next orator. Someone can be the next person that's really impactful to the community. And while I would never tell any child or anybody not to try to be Superman or Batman or whoever, as you grow up, the realism is a little bit different, right? There's the fantasy element that makes these characters superheroes. It makes these stories ones that we follow, that lets us continue to have that imagination that we have as kids that often we lose as adults. So, I mean, there are some subtle differences.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Phoenix Jones?
Phoenix Jones? No, not
well, when you got the interview, look him up. I think he got like a little documentary on YouTube. But I'm trying to interview him. He'd probably be a great person to interview. But I don't know. I was gonna say it for the record. I think he's the first documented modern superhero where he caught.
Oh, wait,
so
is that the
much
guy who's in costume? He's in. Oh God, is it like
Washington.
Oregon or Washington?
Washington.
Okay, yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I do know that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, like, would you consider him a superhero?
I mean, if we're being technical, I think he's a vigilante. To be honest with you, like
That's
Batman
that
is a
blurred line.
vigilante. You know what I mean? Like, so is he a superhero? I don't know, man. I mean, look, if we get
He
like
had the suit. He had the suit, the
takeover,
gadgets.
you know, if we get aliens or something, he fights the alien invasion. If we get like that in real life, then yeah, I'll give him the superhero title at that point. But I think at the moment, right, he's technically a vigilante, but like a state-sponsored vigilante.
Yeah. All right. Well, next question. What toy did you hate the most as a child?
Ooh, what toy did I hate the most? Man, I like a lot of toys as a kid. That's good. But I think I hated the USS Flag from G.I. Joe the most as a kid. But I hated it because I knew I would never be able to get it. Like, that was a toy that you could see in the box, and it's this massive 3-foot-long battleship, right? And even in the commercials, the kids are flying planes on it, and da-da-da-da-da. And I knew that, like, my family, like a lot of us, was very up and down, right? Like, there were times when we were good on money and we were cool, and there were times that we were sheltered poor. You know what I mean? As poor as you could get, basically, without being 100% on the street. And so when that toy was out, and obviously I was growing up, even though I had a good, happy, fulfilled, loved life, I guess, right? I just knew I would never be able to, as a child, get that toy, right? Something that I loved. I loved G.I. Joe. But I knew I was never going to be able to have that. And so it kind of lit a fire in me, right? Because you're given like an unequivocal no before you have a chance to try. And so I guess it spoke to the inequities of pay and finance and money and all this other stuff that as an adult, like, I understand the concepts of now, and the market, and rich versus poor and all of this stuff. But as a kid, all I saw was someone telling me, like, basically I wasn't good enough for something, or I wasn't good enough to be able to get it. So that was a symbol of, like, I guess hate, you know what I mean, for me. Like, that was the one where I was like, every time I saw it in Toys R Us, bro, I just wanted to throw it off the shelf. Like, I obviously was not that kind of kid. My mom was not that lady. We had to keep our hands on the cart, don't touch nothing, blah, blah, the whole deal, right? But, like, I just wanted to every time I saw it, I just wanted to destroy it.
Yeah, man. It's funny. I might have had the same situation with toys because early young, I remember I got a lot of toys, but I didn't get, like, you go to JCPenney's book and, like, circle everything for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember times I didn't get everything I wanted, and later on in life, I'll get all 6 Power Rangers, both of their Megazords and stuff like that later on, and it was just a weird tangent. But, like, now with all these Power Ranger toys coming out, I'm like, man, I always wanted that Megazord. Oh, I always wanted that Dragon Dagger. Then I see the price on it. I was like, $150. Like, even being grown, I'm like, I don't know about that.
Yeah. So
I just imagine, like, being in the 90s and seeing stuff like that, same price, was like, yeah, I see why I didn't get it now.
Yeah. It's, as an adult, I think that, well, I know that I do, right? Like, I've definitely gone back and gotten some of the stuff that I didn't get as a kid, especially like some of the collector stuff. No, man. I still want to break that goddamn thing. Anytime I see it, I just want to throw it down. Now it's like too big and clunky. Like, it don't even make sense. Yeah, I mean, I've gotten, like, I was a huge Batman 1989 fan, so I've always loved that Batmobile. So I got a couple versions of that. Different things as we grow up. I think it's important to kind of, and I think we do this in comics, I think it's important to nurture the child that you were, right? Nurture the child that you wanted to be. We wouldn't be doing this. And anybody who just says, like, oh, I'm an adult and I do this just because I want to, and doesn't have that childhood nostalgia and doesn't say that that's part of it, I feel like they're kind of lying, right? Like, because as adults, our imaginations are different. As adults, the things that we confront are slightly different. Comics are a very nostalgic field. They're a nostalgic market of how they look. and how they're created and things like that. So I think that it's important that we nurture that child within us, especially as creators. If we don't do that, then we're not being true to what we're trying to create. So I definitely, I'm all about that. I'm all about buying the small things and kind of, loving the child that I was and trying to love that child that's within me in a way that kind of strengthens me and strengthens and heals some of the things that you go through as a kid that you don't understand, that you don't get, and they happen, and you have to deal with and have to live with.
Cool. Yep, that's right. All right, for the next question, what is one popular movie that you just can't stand?
Ooh, I have a ton of them. A bunch of popular movies I can't stand. But, I think I don't know. I don't want to say my current. Well, I didn't like Thor: Love and Thunder. Let's just go there. Well, I'll make it easy on myself.
Yeah. So, what's one of your movies?
My popular movie I don't like, honest, is Thor: Love and Thunder, man. I just didn't like it, and I don't get me wrong. I like Taika Waititi as a director. The first movie of his I think I saw was Hunt for the Wilder People. And it was dope. It was kind of off kilter, something I hadn't really seen before. The way it was done. So I like his eye. I like how it's just left the center, just right of center. It's not the same. But even though if you're looking at it through the eyes of Korg is telling this story back, and that's why it's like a little bit more of a farce, and it's a little bit more funny and crazy and whatever. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the story of it. I didn't like, I wanted to see the God Killer kill some gods, man.
They were supposed to put it in a Disney Plus one.
Yeah.
They say it was like they filmed it. They filmed all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it posted like I didn't watch it in theaters, but I watched it on Disney Plus, and they say even the one I watched had more scenes than the one on theaters. So I don't know. I
still think it was okay. Look, man, you had like the Hall of Gods. Why he didn't go through Wreck and Shop? Like again, I feel like the setups were there. I think, but okay. So to be fair as well, though, I think all the Thor movies have been kind of mid, except for Ragnarok. Ragnarok was pretty good, and I think that
because you had Hulk.
Yeah, exactly. right. It changed the dynamic. So I just I love Thor as a character. I like Chris Hemsworth. I love like I said, I love the director. I love all the elements that they had going. I just don't think they put them together well. And I wish it would have been different. I don't want to say better because I think that's a disservice. I would be pissed off if I created a comic and I thought it was dope, and then some random dude is like, "Oh, I wish it would have been better. I wish it would have been different. It wasn't what I wanted." So, yeah, we could keep that one. In my opinion,
I mean, I think he falls in the same thing as I can't think of a hero now, but you can't think of Jason Todd Robin.
Mm-hmm.
He falls in the same thing as him. Like, how many good Jason Todd stories can you like think about?
Yeah.
How many good Thor stories can you think about?
Yeah.
So when you think about it, he got only this couple that you can think of, and that's what they use. And by using that, you push him so far, you skip so much in between. So like Ragnarok is something I think from the 90s maybe, or maybe late 80s.
Yeah.
And like with all the stuff before, he did so many more adventures, but his story's never been that good. So when you picking stories for Thor, you picking here and there, and it ain't much.
Yeah.
And like unless they reboot everything for Jane Foster, and she does the stuff now.
Which so I even like the Jane Foster stuff that they did. I like the idea of it. I like what they were heading towards. I knew she was gonna die because that happened in the comic book. I didn't know it was gonna be in the same movie. But again, man, I think that there were some elements that they brought from the comic books that are current in terms of Mjolnir having its own personality and like thinking and blah 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 blah, like that kind of stuff. And again, I think they played it up, but it just didn't do it for me. I think that there are a couple of Thor cartoons that they've done that have been really epic and really great. And I feel like they could have expanded on some of those ideas. But I also think that when you take Loki out of the equation, in terms of cinematic Thor, you take some of the storytelling away. Some of the greatness of Thor and some of his best stories are him and Loki, and kind of their back and forth and their friends and their enemies and their friends and their enemies, and then they trade on each other. So I think that when you lose that or when you take that kind of away, you kind of hamstring yourself a little bit. Also, the way that the Marvel Cinematic Universe itself is, they wanted to book in some stuff, right? They know they got to get Thor 4 out, but it's also going to come post Endgame. It's going to come post Tony dying. It's going to come post Cap dying, and then also not be something that jumps off the next phase. It's just a part of the current phase. So again, I think that they were painted into a very particular kind of corner, and for what they had, obviously it entertained people and it did what it was supposed to do, and it made some money. It just wasn't my cup of tea necessarily.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I understand. Okay. Well, that's all the questions I got for that segment.
Okay.
You know, we can jump into the next one, which is your back issues.
Mm-hmm.
You know, being in comics, you should know all about back issues. But for people who don't, you know, back issues, if you want to know about a character origin story. And like we just talking about Thor, if you want to know more about Thor, you go on his back issues to find out where he came from. So this set, man, I think go into your back issues to find out where you came from.
Okay. All right.
All right. So first question. Where are you from and what do you call your hood?
So I am from a place called San Pedro, California. That's where I grew up. The majority of my childhood is called Pedro, the Dro. It's where the hood meets the sea. It's a port town, one of the biggest port towns on this coast. I come from a town of longshoremen, really great Italian food, Croatian food. Honestly, not too many black folks, obviously. But just a real homogenous kind of like small hilly town. They do a ton of filming out there, man. If you see San Francisco, 9 times out of 10, it's like actually San Pedro. It ain't Frisco. They film as DC anywhere. So it's a real, like I said, it's a real small kind of town, but it was pretty dope to grow up there. A lot of great experiences. It's right next to Long Beach, California, which a lot of people know. You know, Snoop came from there, you know, et cetera, things like that. It's part of LA County, so you got everything that comes with that, and the culture that LA brings to the table in general. I was just on the, like I said, I was on the ocean side. I was on the beachfront property of LA, as it were.
Okay, cool. Being over there, what was your first encounter with music that got you intrigued and like being that fan of that genre, the artist?
So I feel like this is kind of unfair for me, only because my father was a recording artist of mild fame in the 80s and when I was growing up. So part of me grew up in the studio. Part of me grew up in RCA Record Studio. So I've been into music in any form I could since I was a child. Like I wasn't, even more than comics or cartoons or anything else, like music wasn't a choice. It was just always there. It was always part of who I was. But I grew up also in the time where hip hop was growing up as well. So you know, I went through the X-Clan times and the Black Power age of rap, right before gangster rap took over. Grew up in the gangster rap era. I grew up in the New Jack Swing era. Like I really did. As much as I grew up with like the internet, I grew up with hip hop. So it's been part of my life as long as I can remember. But you know, obviously when I was like a child or when I was younger, moms wasn't really trying to let me listen to NWA like that. And in our background, you know, it was like, hey man, if you want to listen to an hour of rap, you got to listen to an hour of gospel music. You know what I mean? So we had to really like pick the battles.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. So again, I mean, it taught me a lot of things, but like I said, just music in general has permeated my entire life. So for me, it never really was like, I didn't get that moment where it's like, oh man, you hear your first hip hop track and it's like, you know what I mean? Like your entire mind opens up. Again, man, I grew up with De La Soul. I grew up listening to the Fushnikins and you know the Jungle Brothers and all, you know what I mean, like all like the forefathers of hip hop and stuff. So it's like a not completely different for me, but my experience is different in terms of that has been like the life, like kind of the lifeblood of my creation, of who I am. It's, again, just the biggest part of me, as a lot of times religion is for our community, or all these things that we kind of just, we grow up into without any knowledge of there being anything else.
Okay. So what comic? What was the first comic book or comic related TV show that got you liking comics?
I was really, really into Super Friends, which was like on its way out as I was, you know, growing up and I was young. It was like in syndication, you know, Saturday morning kind of stuff. My mom had also bought, years before I was born, she had bought the Superman versus Muhammad Ali comic. And a lot of people may not know this, but regular comics are like booklet sized and they're nice. But this Muhammad Ali comic was like a prestige, you know, size comic. So it's triple the size of a normal one. It's got these big, huge pages. Excuse me. You get to see Muhammad Ali beat the brakes off of Superman. It was wild to me because obviously even as a kid, like I knew who Muhammad Ali was, but I didn't like know the magnitude of his character, right? Like of who he was to the community, who he was to the movement, who he was to everything as a child. But I saw this black dude beating Superman down, right? Which meant he had to be dope. He had to be somebody, you know. And so even before I was like old enough to like read it, you know, I'm flipping through the pages just over and over and over again. So that was the comic that started this. It's an obsession. It started this obsession with telling these larger than life kind of stories and seeing things that I had previously never seen before. Because again, if you're watching the cartoons and stuff, Superman doesn't lose, right? He doesn't take an L, which that makes sense. It's a child's cartoon, but seeing the difference between that and seeing this comic book where now he did take an L and he did have to come back and he had to overcome some stuff. It was just it just set such a stage for me. That was I can't really put a price on it, right? Like that was one of those moments. It's like the first time you see the titles for Star Wars. It's like a moment. The music is blaring and the titles are going back and they're setting the stage for you. And that comic kind of set that stage for me, like on a lifetime kind of thing.
Okay. With me, I mean, with certain, you know, with everybody else, you know, the anime series, Spider-Man, Batman, X-Men, you know, that was shows that got me. But like you speaking about Superman and whatnot, I'm not a Superman fan because like I guess got too much plot armor. He might as well be an anime character. But I guess, but I've watched like his shows younger, and just by you talking, like he never took an L. That's probably why I never liked him. But in the shows, he was more him trying to fit in. It was always Clark trying to fit in. He didn't fit in.
Yeah.
Versus the comics, he's already like OP and doing everything.
Yeah.
But in like Lois and Clark in Smallville, he's always trying to fit in, and I guess that drove me more towards, I guess, Clark versus Superman.
Yeah. I think that there are a couple really good series. Excuse me, that do that. Like All Star Superman is a great story of like Superman at his most vulnerable, which is always emotionally vulnerable. But I think, and I'm not in the back of DC, but I think that DC has sometimes the same problem that WWF has. They get limited scope. The writers get limited scope on what they could do. If you look at WWF, and I call it WWF still, even though it's WWE, whatever, Vince has limited what they can say and do so much. Hey, you can't call the heavyweight title the strap. You can't do X amount of moves. You can't do, you know what I mean? They get painted into such small corners that when you get somebody like, again, a couple years ago, when you get Roman Reigns and they're trying to push him to the top as the guy, his push is the same as John Cena's was. His push is the same as The Rock's was, right? There's no originality. And it's not because the writers don't want it. It's because they're painted into such a fine corner. I think the same goes for someone like Superman or even Batman. They can't take what would be called traditional L's, right? Because they're the characters have to keep such a status that it's very hard for them to lose in the traditional sense. And that's very hard when you're trying the story form. And it's very hard when you're sometimes trying to get brand new readers to like what you do, and brand new readers to get in on what you're creating. And I think that's something that crosses over in indie comics, right? Superman has 50 plus years of history where that there's a reason why he is who he is, why he does what he does. But it's still hard for new readers to kind of get into that. Indie comics jumps those 50 years of history, and they're just like, my character's OP, he's dope, he can beat everybody, and blah, 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 blah. Yep. And then you're like, well, why do you care about anything he does? Right? And that's the conundrum that you have with Superman now. Why do you care about anything he does? Well, Superman's story should never be about Superman's powers, because who cares? We know what they are. We know he's going to do something dope. We know he's going to fight somebody. You know, he's going to fight Darkseid. Darkseid's going to be, you know, actually go toe-to-toe with him. That's great, but it's not about who he's fighting or how he's fighting. It's about why he's fighting. It's about what's the thing behind it. What is he struggling for? What's his obstacle? Because the fight is not an obstacle for him. That's what he does. It's all those other things.
Yeah, true. When did you find that you're a blurred?
It was never a question for me, man, to be honest with you. Well, I mean, I guess it was. Because, again, I grew up in a different time. But I was one of those guys, even though I played football, I lettered in varsity, blah, 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 the whole deal. But I still was a guy who had comic books in his bag every day. Like, it didn't matter. Like, I was known as an artist when I was in school. I drew all the time. I wrote all the time. So it never was a thing to me. Blurred has also come to mean something different. Again, when I was kind of coming up, nerds weren't even made just because of anime or because of Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. Nerds were nerds because they were nerds, for lack of better words, right? Like it was more of a stylistic thing, right? It was more, honestly, nerds were more of a dress and study thing than it was the culture of what they watched or consumed or whatever media, right? Like the nerd was the dude who, nobody wore polo shirts, you know what I mean? Like buttoned up when we were in school, right? But that was a style thing that was different, right? But then, obviously, as style changes, now people do it, and it's common. People weren't wearing button-ups, you know, all the way buttoned up, right? With khaki pants on. That was what made somebody a nerd, you know what I mean? Or the first one to raise their hand and answer the math question. You were like, oh, nerd. As opposed to like, oh, he likes anime, he's a nerd. You know what I mean? Oh, he likes comics, he's a nerd. The definitions, I guess, have changed a little bit.
Speaking of styles, you know, you bringing that up. The style has changed. Like, I guess the cool kids are the one dressing up, being all nice and neat.
Exactly.
And nerds are the one that dress and got the tall tees on still, you know, and got the DC shoes still on.
Exactly, right? So, I don't know. Like, I mean, I think that obviously people love the term blurred. And it has more to do with the culture and the entertainment or whatever that we consume than it does our dressing style. But I feel like, at least for me, right, my experience back in school was how you dress kind of dictated a lot of times who you were, not what you were necessarily like consuming. If you dress like a basketball player all the time, people thought you were a hooper. You know what I mean? Like if you dress like a football player all the time, you were a jock. So it was more clothing than it was just the stuff you did. So again, man, experience is a little bit different in terms of that. So I'm blurry by nature, I guess, man. It was just always all day, and it just was who I was, and it always has been.
Yeah, it makes sense. A lot of me and a lot of my guests, we went through this thing. I've been dubbing the nerd gap. It's where like you did watch, you know, the cartoons, the comics, and all that, but then you took a little hiatus from it to do other things. Then, you know, you eventually came back to it. Did you go through that?
Actually, I don't think I did, man. I was always into it. Obviously, football was like a huge part of my life in my high school career. Right, I thought I was going to be like everybody else. Oh, I'm going to go to the league. but you know, I didn't grow past 5'8", and I'm trying to be a receiver, so I had to wake up. You know what I mean? I'm not Wes Welker or somebody. But I don't think I ever dropped one for the other, right? Like, I never compromised sports for entertainment. I think if anything got dropped, it was my schooling, right? Like, I would slack in school, and that was kind of the thing. But I never really went away from what I found to be fun and entertaining, based on any of that other stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that I wasn't trying to be as hard as everybody else, because we posture and we try to figure ourselves out and our place in the world and all of this other stuff that we have to do. But, I mean, again, in my formative years, I would have dared anybody to, okay, yeah, make fun of my comics. Like, you know what I mean? Oh, I didn't experience, oh man, he watching cartoons, let's make fun of him. For one, I feel like everybody got made fun of for everything anyway. Again, if you dress funny, if you tripped, if your shoes had scuffs on them, like whatever, you're going to get made fun of anyway. So it wasn't really like a thing of like, I don't know anybody who was like, oh man, he watched those Japanese cartoons, let's make fun of him, right? Like, everybody was really trying to get on. If he was talking about Dragon Ball, and I guess if he was passionate enough about it, and even if somebody made fun of you, I always feel like we were kind of funny enough to go back at him. And that wasn't the sticking point, right? We just kind of did what we did. Like, kind of regardless.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, that's in the back issues, you know, for you. You know, people got a good, you know, tangent of here over there for you. So that's great. We can move on to the next segment, which I call the hotkeys.
Oh.
Which another thing, since you've been in music, you should know what it already is.
Yeah.
People who don't know, hotkeys are buttons on a DJ turntable where they can press the trigger a certain song or a part of the song, you know, to get the party hype, you know, as well. In comics, you know, hotkeys are key issues, you know, when new artists or new writer get on our project, or a key event, or when a character is introduced or first appearance, you know, that'd be a key issue, or a hot key rather. And this segment is a whole bunch of questions that, you know, that I asked you previously, or that I came up with myself. Be the hot takes, you know, the hot keys of this interview, so people can take something away, you know, the key things about you. So, with that being said, you know, you gave me two topics. You know, I'm gonna blend them together. How do you feel about like Marvel and DC being the mainstream, and indie being, I guess, anybody who's not under that umbrella, handling their IPs, their projects? Because now, you know, you're seeing, like, you know, first it was, I'll say DC was first, but really Marvel was first, getting their IPs out and actually making a brand behind it and making all these film TV shows. Where now you see the indies, you know, they're coming out with their own stuff like The Walking Dead, you know, Lock and Key, and The Boys and stuff like that, putting their IPs out for shows. So, and they're being hits. So where do you think DC falls short, or Marvel falls short of these making hits? And because in my eyes, I should not be watching Falcon and the Winter Soldier the same way I'm watching The Boys, because the branding and the money. So where do you think they are falling short at with their IPs?
I actually don't think that Marvel and DC are falling short. I think that our level of consumption is different than what it would have been X amount of years ago. So even if we go back to when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. had hit, right? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did something that had never been seen in TV before. So if you watch, what was it? If you watch one episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and then you watch Captain America and the Winter Soldier, and then you watch the next week's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., all three of them linked up, and it was dope. It was like, oh man, S.H.I.E.L.D. is an agency, and then you watch the movie and S.H.I.E.L.D. goes down, and then you come back and S.H.I.E.L.D. is broken up, and blah, 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 blah. So I think that they've done a good job with getting their narratives and spinning those narratives, right? Like, there's no other company that's doing multiple narratives that work together across multiple platforms, and to tell a cohesive story, even if there are different branches to it. No one else is doing that. DC has been doing their thing for years. Like you said, you mentioned Lois and Clark, right? Lois and Clark was fired. They actually waited to marry Lois and Clark on the TV show until they put out the comic book where Lois and Clark got married, right? Like all these things had to go in conjunction. So DC's been doing TV, unconnected TV for a long time. The CW gets a lot of grief, right? Because the CW is the CW. But at the same time, it's still a multi-million-dollar company and a multi-billion-dollar machine putting out some actually pretty top quality stuff. Some of the CG is a little flighty, but anybody who knows anything about no CG, it's not inexpensive. It's not cheap. It's a very expensive form of creating images and doing what you do. So I think that they are doing actually a really, really good job at it. What I think with how many streaming platforms we have, how much we crave streaming and we want things in, you're just getting a lot more material. So while we're talking about something like Superman, or we're talking about something like The Boys or Lock and Key, right? These are things that already had followings behind them, right? Now, if it's kind of, you can't compare the following of The Walking Dead, which is a series, right, to Marvel, their entire umbrella's following, right? And so sometimes it's a little bit easier to focus in, right? The idea, and even The Walking Dead went off the rails, right? But the idea of The Walking Dead is very simple. A small group of plucky survivors as they go through basically, the apocalypse and surviving the apocalypse, right? That's not a difficult thing. That's been done a bajillion times in movies, you know what I mean? Night of the Living Dead, on and on and on, these other things. So it's something that's easier to focus. The same for The Boys. The Boys does it, and The Boys show is much different than the comic. But it's also very formulaic, right? We've set up this villain, we've set up Homelander, we've set up these things. It's very easy to kind of follow their exploits. And it's sometimes easier to be gory or to be more graphic than it is to not do that. It's much easier to have Homelander punch somebody's face off than to have Superman not punch somebody's face off, right? And can have continuous good storytelling. So I think that while all these things are comics, the fact that the media even like compares them, they're so different, right? Like we barely used to compare soap operas, and they're the exact same genre of storytelling. But we don't compare One Life to Live to Passions to, you know what I mean? Like whatever, because they deal with such vastly different audiences. And that's one of the things. Marvel and DC being the big two are bringing their things to the masses, right? But most of the stuff they're bringing to the masses is superheroic. It is larger than life. Whereas again, something like The Walking Dead is very grounded. And that's the strength of it. So I don't believe that Marvel and DC are failing. I think that our tastes are changing. And I also think that people forget that these are popcorn movies. Look, Endgame and Infinity War were dope. They were great, but they were enders. They were bookends. And people forget that part too, because people, it's not as good as Endgame, or it didn't make me feel like Infinity War. Yeah, because that was the end of an era. They're not supposed to all feel that epic. They're not all, like, you're not going to get that Avengers Assemble moment ever again in cinema. Right? We waited 12 years to hear Cap say that. To have him with the hammer, to have every Marvel hero there. So you're not going to get that thing again. And to compare The Boys, to compare Quantumania, to compare any of them to those moments, that doesn't make sense. These are popcorn movies. Just like we don't compare the Fast and the Furious to Marvel movies or to The Godfather or something, because they're popcorn movies. And people have kind of lost a little bit of that, in my opinion, when we're talking about the streaming wars and we're talking about these series. And when you're talking about something like Lock and Key that has its own magic system that sets up all this different stuff, right? It's created its own world. And you're getting your own world in one dedicated series, as opposed to, let's say, a Marvel that has one world spread over 12 movies and 4 series.
Yeah, that's right. With that being said, with comics, people always with comics and manga. I guess before being too deep in comics, I would see like, yeah, manga's winning, manga's better, manga has stuff, better formulated, that's why it's winning. But since I'm in comics now and I'm seeing it, I see where manga is falling short from comics, going to these cons, I see people have a whole bunch of manga and anime related stuff on their tables, and I see people going towards that. But comics, I want to do videos about how you get into comics, because it's very easy and it's really winning because it's still a $1 billion company.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can share a page, out of context page, it's really big, of comic book, of Nightwing throwing a little black girl in the air.
Yeah.
And everybody talk about it, like, what's going on? Why he do that? And people will want to go to that issue and read, because we already know these characters and it's out of context why he's doing that. Versus I pick a random page from a manga of Goku popping in on Boma, in the bathroom, and you just know, oh, they're friends, haha, that's Goofy, that's funny, he don't know nothing. And nobody want to go to chapter whatever, Dragon Ball Super, and see why that happened.
Yeah.
So I feel like comics are winning versus manga. But how do you feel in that whole aspect of manga and comics,
I honestly hate the debate, because I mean, maybe get me in some trouble, but I don't care. People are stupid when they have that debate, right? Like, when they really try to go hard on, like, anime manga is superior, right? Because it always becomes an anime and manga thing. And they're completely different, right? They're not, stories are stories, but how they are done is completely different. Anime and manga has a certain look 9 times out of 10, right? There are 10 different looks, but they're all anime and manga. As soon as you see it on page, you know exactly what it is, right? Comics are the same way. 10 different looks of how comics are laid out, but as soon as you see it a comic, right? And what's the difference? American versus Japanese. Okay, big deal. One of the things that manga takes a leg up sometimes is, we're talking about production costs. Well, if only your cover is in color and the rest of your book is in black and white, you're saving on production costs. That's just dollars and cents. Good. So then you can put together a longer book, but also it's smaller because it's like a full book. Whereas comics are still doing floppy issues, right? 22 pages versus a 70-page book.
What kills me about the whole book thing too is, like, they're like, oh, you're a Demon Slayer, so many books. Yeah, that's cool and all, but like people say, that's the same author, same artist.
Yeah.
So chapters 1 through 6 probably didn't get no attention.
Yeah.
Now chapter 5, now they got the first volume out because the first 5 chapters came out.
Yeah.
Now that's a different wholesale.
Exactly.
So now it's catching up.
Exactly.
Now people going and say, oh, chapter 6 was cool, let me go read up. Now they're buying book 1. Versus people who's coming in at chapter 100, they say, oh, that's dope.
Yeah.
So they buying everything beforehand, and those sales are adding up.
Exactly.
But if I'm a writer on, let's say, Batman, they give me, 6 issues to do something? And they might see it's dope, say, oh man, Specks did a great run on Batman. And they're going to buy my trade. And that's it. They're not going to go back and like, dang, that Batman story was pretty dope. Let's go back to Detective Comics number whatever and start reading. They're not going to do that in comics.
Yeah.
So I think
also
that's happening too.
Also, look, like you said, Demon Slayer, right? The big stuff, look, in every field, the big stuff is the stuff that people end up talking about and being like, oh, it's amazing. People don't talk about how many failures there are in manga daily. You know what I mean? How many series get launched and don't go anywhere. Again, it's the same with comics. There really is very, very little difference between manga and American comics. Very, very little difference. Obviously, like, people are like, oh, well, you read it this way and that. Bro, that's because that's the culture, right? Like, that's because that's how you read there. That's not something that makes it special, right? It's special to an American audience because we read differently. Just like an American comic would be special to them. So it's just, even the stories themselves, when people are like, oh, they're doing different stories and they develop characters different. No, they don't. Goku, I gotta push past my limits. Deku, I gotta push past my limits. Demon Slayer, I gotta push past my... Like, bro, the heroes are the same, right? Like, all of it's the same.
Even the other genres, the same thing.
Exactly. So, again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that I don't enjoy both, because I 100% do. I love it all. I think that Fire Force, when I watch Fire Force, the anime, it has the best sound design I've ever heard in any cartoon in my life. I think that My Hero Academia has some of the best musical cues I've ever heard in my life. You know what I mean? On and on and on. I think that everything has, like, its place, but, like, the whole debate of one versus the other, or one being superior to the other, is just super elitist. Like you said, oh, comics are losing. Look, let me be losing and be worth $1 billion. Let me be $1 billion market and I'm losing. Oh, billion? Come on now. So it's very elitist, and it's a very, like, nerd culture thing of, like, I know better than you, and that's why I'm telling you Japanese comics are better than American comics, because I'm smarter and I've been doing it for longer. Whereas, like, no, they're both comics, they're both fun. You can enjoy both and both make a ton of money. Knock it off, right? Because for every good story in manga that you're going to find, there's going to be a ton of bad ones. Every bad story you find in comics, there are going to be a ton of good ones, and vice versa. Stop it. I hate the argument, because it's pretty fucking lame, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. With that whole argument, you know, I'm pretty sure other arguments gonna happen for you to create your own, you know, comic book universe. So, like, what made you go into Wingless Comics and create Justice and her and Immortals?
So Justice came from probably. So I'm a big cinema guy too. I love movies. I'm actually gonna go and see Fast and the Furious 10 in just a little bit. And I was watching a Japanese horror flick. I forget which one. It might have been The Ring. But I was watching this horror flick. No, I was watching, not the Japanese version, because the Japanese version was scary. And I had already seen that. I was watching the American remake. And it drove me crazy. I like yin and yang, right? I like darkness and light. I like the imagery of a war of darkness and light at all times, right? I love the imagery of you're fighting the demon, you know, inside you, outside you, however you want to say it, right? Like, if you're a good person, you're fighting against your darker impulses, or if you're a bad person, you're fighting against the good impulses. I just love that duality, right? Yin and yang is such an amazing concept to me. So I was watching this movie, and the hero, right, is fighting this demon. You know, you got to do the whole thing with the ring and show somebody else a tape because you're cursed and da-da-da-da-da. And there was, like, no winning. And it pissed me off that the hero was crying and begging and crawling away. And, I was like, damn, like... and it's the same in, like, the Conjuring universe and all these places, right? You'll get this demon or this evil entity that's, like, got thousands of years of power and can, like, use telekinesis and throw you across the room. And what do they end up doing? Like, they end up running and hiding and closing a door on them. You know what I mean? It's something, like, ridiculous. And it was pissing me off. It just made me so mad. And I was like, but if this is a war, right? Again, if we're talking about duality, and if this is a war between darkness and light, something that's going on for eons and since the dawn of time and blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's a war. That means there are warriors on both sides, right? So I wanted to see somebody badass that was, like, also good, right? And so you have heroes like Thor that are based off Norse mythology. You have heroes like Hercules that are based off Greek mythology and you know, Ra and different characters. Excuse me. And I wanted to, because it's the historically the culture I come from, I wanted to play around with what I call Christian mythology. Now, I don't use it as a base for truth or to preach what people should believe or to convert people or anything. I grew up in the church. My beliefs are my beliefs at this point, and they are not the original beliefs that I grew up with in the church. But I feel like there's a lot of rich storytelling that can be mined from those lessons, from those stories, from that era of knowledge. And it just always seemed really cool to me to be able to do that, right? Like the image, when I got the image of an angel with these large black wings and locks, you know what I mean? I was like, bro, I have never seen that before. That's going to be fire. That's going to be something that in 10 years, 12 years, some little kid is going to be like, hey, I saw this picture of this character, may not even know the name. I saw the picture of this character, and it made me want to do comics. Because I was like, that's going to be a look. That's going to be fire. And I just wanted to do that. I just wanted to tell some stories. We can have... Spawn has 300 issues, right? And I'm a fan of Spawn. I love Spawn. Spawn has 300 issues, and he can be a hell spawn, a literal hell spawn, fighting against hell, right? And just doing what he got to do. Get gully with it, kill people, you know, explode stuff, necroplasmic energy, all these cool little concepts. And I was like, well, why don't, on the other end, why don't we have that? Why don't we have somebody that's just as ruthless, just as vicious, but doesn't have to be steeped in darkness to do it, right? His fight should be against darkness at all times. Against his darker impulses, against wanting to unleash everything, against wanting to go crazy. The fight that we fight every day. I was on a show just yesterday or the day before, and I said that justice is in a lot of ways like a black man, like the black experience of having to walk into a room and have power, have knowledge, have all these things that we know we have, but still have to prove it, right? And still have to meter your responses. Still know, man, I can destroy this dude. But if I do, they're going to judge everybody that comes after me. If I do what this person deserves, I've ruined it for not only me, but I've ruined it for all these other people. So having to meter and walk that line, right, on a cosmic scale, on a comic scale, I think, to me, that's just such an engaging story. It's being very cognizant of being, no matter how much you do, how much you are, at the end of the day, someone is going to look at you and be like, there's still a black man, right? Which to them means that you get points off. Which to them means you can't be passionate about something because then you're aggressive and intimidating and dangerous, right? And having all these things and all these elements in front of you and in your hands and having to be a good steward of them, not just for you, but for this next generation. That was what I wanted to do with this storytelling. And that's, once I had the idea and I had the concept and I knew I could go that way, there was no choice for me but to go that way. I had to, because it kind of writes itself and it's writing a version of our lives as we live them right now.
Cool. Yeah, it makes sense. I think I read your book. I think I just have the digital or something. But I'm pretty sure I read your book when you was doing the thing with Concrete Comics. Mm-hmm. And I seen some of the elements of that. Kind of remind me of like Gargoyles mixed with Spawn. So now you say you're a fan of Spawn. I see the elements.
I'm a fan of Gargoyles too, bro. Own the whole series. That series was amazing, no doubt.
Yeah, but I haven't read Her. So what's Her about?
Her is Malachi Bailey. That's his brainchild. That's his baby. Shouts out to Mal. Mal is actually up for 4 Glyph Awards. By the time this airs, we will know whether or not he won them. But good luck, Mal, in your endeavors. But it's about, so Her spins off from Malachi's novel series. His novel series is about the same character. Excuse me. She's a long-lived immortal who basically every time she dies, she comes back with a new persona, a new personality, sometimes and oftentimes a new face, and a new set of powers. So in her current incarnation, she is a water elemental. And part of her journey is honestly figuring out who she is and why she exists. The other part is kind of fulfilling the legacy of her tribe, which was wiped out millennia ago. She's a protector, and she goes into that again as she's kind of like an odd man out now, right? Because she doesn't know necessarily our current time. She doesn't understand certain concepts, so she's kind of a fish out of water, and it's kind of her journey of discovery of who she is, why she is, and kind of a journey that we all go through, right? Like, why do we do this? Why are we here? what are we here for? Are we here to help people? Are we here to be mothers, to be fathers? Are we here to create great businesses? And she's got to kind of figure all that out. She's got to figure out why. Like, she's got to figure out her why. And her why is just inexorably connected to the larger workings of the world and the cosmic world and the Orishas and all these other things that will come into play as she continues her journey.
Okay. Now with these titles like Immortals, Justice, and her, I know you're not the writers of those books, but early in the show, you was like, you got this good team behind you. So, how hard was it to find your team? Did they come to you and you came to them? And how did y'all formulate, I guess, Wingless Comics?
It was actually extremely hard, but also effortless once it happened. I started, like you said, like you mentioned, I actually started with Concrete Comics. That's where I had released Justice Zero originally. And then I decided to leave Concrete Comics because I wanted to do my own thing. When I was leaving Concrete, I just set out and I was like, hey, I'm going to do Justice by myself. But Malachi and I had already been communicating just in general stuff. We had started talking about comics. We struck up a pretty good friendship. You know what I mean? Just regular kind of things.
Yeah.
And we were both novel writers by trade. So we had exchanged novels. And as I was originally reading her novel, and some of our comic conversations, I just inboxed him, man. I was like, have you ever thought about doing comics? And he was, no, but I would love to. It'd be my dream and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, why don't you just do comics, man? Like, do comics. And he was, again, we started talking. It was kind of real brotherly of like, come on, man, we can make this happen. And we did. So Malachi was the first person after I launched Wingless Comics to be part of Wingless Comics with me. Brett Hillisham, who is the author and the creator of Immortalis, also the founder of Indie Comics Dispatch. I had done a bunch of interviews with Brett, and again, he and I had struck up a pretty good friendship. I co-hosted with him a couple times on his podcast. And he had told me months before we launched, he had said that, hey, man, I got an idea I really, really want to do, but just, wait, give me a little bit of time, and I'll get back to you. And honestly, I had forgotten. But Brett was working with us doing some marketing. He was doing some editing, a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. And he gave me a pitch for Immortalis, and it just fit in with the universe I was already creating so well that it was an immediate yes. And so that's how I formed, or that's how the main three creators, or the original three, basically, creators formed with Wingless Comics. As far as my art team goes, again, I was very fortunate and very lucky. Fabio Samao, I saw his art one night. I reached out to him. He did a couple pinups for me, and I have loved every single piece he's ever done for me. And he will be my artist as long as I can keep him around. We just work really well together. We understand each other, even though, again, he's from Brazil, right? So there's like a little bit of a language gap sometimes on both ends. But it actually ended up being good because we've learned how to communicate with each other. We've been working together for like 3 years now. So we learned how to communicate, and he sees visually what I want a lot of times, and sometimes even when he changes my panel descriptions or the way I'm seeing it, he's done better. He's like, hey, I switched this up because of this and this, and it makes total sense. So we just kind of got that communication going. Malachi is doing the same with his team with Nimish Miraji, who's doing his colors, and Dino Agor. Again, we've been very fortunate. We try to communicate the best we can, and that's what creates great teamwork and great relationships, even if you're having difficult conversations. And it helps to add intelligently. I get inboxes all the time of people wanting to write for Wingless Comics or draw for Wingless Comics or whatever. And they're a lot of times really, really good people. That doesn't mean they work with the system that we have and how we work and how we flow. We brought on Lawrence King with a joint publishing deal with Constant Hustle Comics. So we'll be publishing Avery because Avery is a great addition to the Wingless world. And I really wanted to make sure that we continue to do that. We've also brought on Jay Heron for Scarlet Knight, Defender of the Block, because I really like the mythology and how it works. And again, man, sometimes it takes hard conversations. All of those guys will tell you, like, I'll be in everybody's inbox, and they're like, all right, man, like, basically fall back, leave me alone, because sometimes you have to push people, and you really have to be on it if you're really serious about it. It's very easy in this game to neglect what you should be doing in favor of, like, looking cool or looking like a blurred, right? And not doing the hard work that it actually takes to create a comic. Comics are not easily made. People think like, oh, I could just create a comic. You know as well as I do, it's not easy.
Yeah.
You may lose an artist. You may fall back in production, like all these other things. And once you've done that, okay, now you got to come out of pocket, or you got to figure it out. So it's not easy.
I'm going through that right now. Actually, I lost an artist, and so it delayed me. So the book I was supposed to put out last year, I'm actually this time last year supposed to come out, and it's probably gonna come out next month. So a whole year, like,
see, yeah, and there's nothing you can do about that. Like, it's out of your hands.
Yep.
And people don't get that, and so you need, well, not that you need, right? It's been beneficial for me to have people on the back end that at least understand that. If Malachi can't handle it for me, right? He understands the process. He understands what's happened, and can take a different side of the burden off. And you really just got to support people. Kind of, it's hard, right? Because we're in an ego-driven business, but you got to put ego to the side sometimes and make sure, like, regardless of what you kind of want, that everybody is moving in the same direction. And I'm very fortunate that we're all moving in the same direction, and we all understand the direction we're going. And if we don't, we're smart enough to ask each other what the direction is. And they trust me enough to guide the ship. I know I have a clear vision for where I want us to go, what I want us to do, and how I want us to get there. And they trust me, and so that's a big part of it too.
Okay. Kickstarter's probably still going on when this airs, but after this Kickstarter, what's next for Justice and Wingless Comics?
So we're gonna have a pretty man. This year is gonna be pretty packed, to be honest with you. Towards the end of the year, we've got between 2 to 3 more titles that we're gonna launch before the end of the year. So we're looking at Immortalis launching on Kickstarter. We're looking at Her #2 launching on Kickstarter. We're also looking at Avery the Astonishing #2 launching on Kickstarter before the end of the year. So we're going to have those for sure. Going into next year, obviously we're going to have Justice #5. We're going to have Scarlet Knight #3, which is a relaunch of the title on Wingless Comics. So we will be on Kickstarter every month or two, which is the indie comics way to kind of stay relevant. A lot of people try to jump into previews and do all these things, right? But your average audience doesn't know anything about previews. They don't know anything about that. So the way that we keep our audience engaged and keep storytelling and building this universe is by releasing multiple titles throughout the year that form together to tell this Marvel-esque story, right? We're telling this larger story over 12 titles. Now, they're not necessarily interconnected with each episode, but the overall world is connected, and you're going to see ripples of things that happen in Justice. You're going to see those ripples in Her and in Scarlet Knight and in Avery, and you're going to see things that happen in Immortalis ripple through all the rest of the books. And that's the way that we kind of keep everything going and keep our audience engaged. So, yeah, anywhere between another, again, 1 to 3 or 4 books before the end of the year on Kickstarter from Wingless Comics.
All right, that's cool. That's cool. I got anything else? I think that's it. I think that's it for this segment. I don't think I get more questions. But that's the end of that segment. We're going to the last segment. Gonna hit you with one question. It's called digging in the crates.
Okay.
Both double-sided term. In comics, you dig in the crates. You find that old classic Batman issue, or that you might even find that Superman versus Muhammad Ali issue. In there, as well as in music. You dig in the crates. You go through the vinyls or go through them CDs to find that classic. You want that physical copy of. Put up on the wall, or you want to put it on a CD player you got hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
But this is one thing people can take away from this interview, like a Nobel Prize question or something like that. With that being said, with you, I know you previously said that you used to draw when you was in school, but now you're a writer, and I know you've been doing some some colors recently. So, like, you got some magical item. I can't think right now, but somebody walk up to you and they give you a choice, you know, A or B. You can have great powers of, you know, being an artist, or great powers of being a writer, but you lose the vice versa, you know, or whatever you choose. So what would be your choice? Would you be a better or a great writer, or a better or great artist, but you lose the other skill when you trade off?
That's hard. Wait a minute. Okay, so is this like a Mephisto type deal? Because if it's like Mephisto, I can kind of try to be shady and get both. But
so you still can write, but it's not gonna get you no Pulitzer Prize or anything like that. And, and if you still can draw, but you probably won't get no commissions.
Okay, so look, I'm in that. Well, I'm not a Pulitzer Prize writer yet, but I'm in that bind right now. So I think at this very moment, if there was a trade-off, I would actually take the drawing. I would take the art. The reason I would take the art, though, is because I have extensive notes on everything I write. So
you got backlog.
Yeah, right. So booklets and booklets, man. I got I'm looking at them right now. I think I got 5 of those 6 division 5-star first gear spiral binders that I got notes in all the margins of all the stories I want to do. So if I had if it was like, hey man, you could draw tomorrow, you could draw you gonna wake up and you could draw Jim Lee or Michael Turner tomorrow, but you got to kind of give up, you know, some of your writing chops. I would take it because I can earn my writing chops back up, right? Like I can get those back, right? I believe that I am a natural storyteller, but storytelling and writing are completely different, and that's something that indies don't really get. Everybody's got a story, right? So they want to tell this cool story about their person, but telling a cool story about your person and writing is completely different, right? There's a craft to writing. Writing is a series of rules and how you do things and blah, 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 blah. So, again, if I could draw like Jim Lee tomorrow, I got enough notes and I got enough books and how-tos and enough schooling that I can go back to where I would get my writing back up to where it is now. But then I'd have the additional ability to draw my ass off, which I would take in a second. I kind of regret that I stopped drawing as I got older. So you talked about the break earlier, you know, with the nerd break and coming back to it. I didn't necessarily take the nerd break, but I took a break from drawing for a long time. And I wish, at this point in my life, that I had stayed with it. While I might not be drawing and writing my own comics wholesale, doing the entire thing, I think I would do a lot of covers like I do now in terms of coloring. I'll do pinups and stuff like that. I don't necessarily want to color page for page, but it would be really cool to have the ability to draw a Justice cover tomorrow and have it look as good as something Fabio could do, which I'm nowhere near that. I cannot, but it would be great to have that ability. That's something that I would love to be able to do.
Okay. That's dope. Well, that's the end of the show. Thanks for being on. If people want to purchase any of your books or follow you anywhere after this Kickstarter, or just follow your journey and just keep up with you, where can I do that at?
So obviously we're on Kickstarter right now. You can just search Wingless Comics and we will come up. We are the only Wingless Comics in the game, thankfully. The same for our Instagram, Wingless Comics. The same for our Facebook, Wingless Comics. Our Twitter is slightly different. Our Twitter is Wingless Entertainment. If you want to follow the company itself or see all the links, you can go to www.winglessentertainment.com. And we're there. We're there to even email us. You can ask us any questions you have. It's got all of our social media links there. There are also purchase links for merchandise and books and the entire run of things. So we're very easy to find. You can also follow me on Facebook, myself, Brian J. Lambert. Again, I'm easy to find. You'll find me linked in with Wingless Comics and all that. My IG is personal, private. just because sometimes you need a little bit of a social media break. So I do keep that private. But other than that, again, anytime you type in Wingless Comics, I'm going to show up. We're going to show up, and we're always there and available.
All right, man. That's dope, man. Once again, thanks for being on, and I enjoyed you.
Thank you very much for having me, bro. I appreciate you.
So, The View, he's still doing second of his books, putting the shipment out for all the backers and supporters of, his book. But I guess Brian Lambert, he got his own Kickstarter and stuff going on right now. Y'all check him out, man. Wingless Comics, they got several titles out right now, man. Y'all make sure y'all support all of them right now. Great dude, great company. And if you want to get some of these books and reviews second up, man, go to legacyview.com, go ahead and purchase some. And go ahead and follow him at LegacyView in all social media. And if you want to follow me at Specks706. And you want to be part of the show, hit us up at chillonthegreenbox.com. And we're out.